Lick them. Show your absolute submission. I said lick his shoes!
She was on her knees on marble floor, worth more than her entire life, being ordered to lick a 7-year-old boy's shoes clean. What nobody in that mansion knew, not the boy, not his father, not the woman giving the order, was that the blood keeping 2 people in that house alive right now belonged to her. In 11 minutes, she was going to stand back up, and everyone under that roof was going to wish she never had. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought money made them better than you, stay with this one all the way to the end, because what this woman survives to get her family back is going to stay with you long after it's over. My name is not important right now. What matters is what happened to Sophia Bennett, and what it cost her to make things right. 5 years before that night on the marble floor, Sophia was not Sophia Bennett. She was Sophia Whitfield, married to Lucas Whitfield, heir to one of the largest logistics fortunes on the East Coast. They met in college, long before any of the money mattered to either of them, back when Lucas was just a tired engineering student and Sophia was waiting tables to pay for nursing school. They had a son together, Liam, and for a while, their life looked exactly like the life everyone envies from the outside. A house on the water, a husband who still opened doors for her after 6 years of marriage, a little boy who fell asleep most nights in her arms instead of his own bed. Then everything fell apart within the same year. Lucas started losing weight he could not explain, and his skin turned a color no one wanted to name out loud. Liver failure, the specialists finally said, likely genetic, likely years in the making. Before Sophia had even finished processing that sentence, Liam started getting sick too. Kidney failure, at 4 years old, a cruel coincidence layered on top of an already unbearable one. Doctors ran test after test looking for a donor match for both of them, and there was only one person in the family whose blood came back compatible with either, Sophia. She gave up a kidney for her son. 4 months later, before her body had fully recovered from the first surgery, she gave up part of her liver for her husband. The surgeons pulled her aside afterward, in a hallway where Lucas could not hear them, and told her plainly that her body would likely never fully recover from carrying both losses so close together. She would need lifelong monitoring. She would need rest she was not going to get, caring for a recovering husband and a recovering son at the same time. And there was a real chance, they told her quietly, that her own health would deteriorate faster than anyone in that family understood. She never told Lucas any of that. Instead, in the months that followed, watching him grow stronger, while she grew quieter and more exhausted every day, she made a decision that would define the next 5 years of her life. She staged an affair. She let old photographs surface where they would be found. She let herself be seen somewhere she should not have been. She let her own husband believe that she had cheated on him and abandoned him and their still fragile son while they were recovering, rather than let him find out what the surgeries had actually cost her, and rather than become, in her own mind, a lifelong burden to a family that had already survived enough. What Lucas never knew, and what Sophia barely let herself think about most days, was that she was pregnant when she left. She gave birth alone, months later, to a daughter she named Annie, fathered by a family friend and surgeon named Dr. Ethan Miller, the same man who had performed both of the original transplant surgeries. Annie was born with a rare blood disorder of her own, one that required constant transfusions and medications Sophia could barely afford working 2 jobs on her own. If you already know what it feels like to disappear from your own life to protect the people you love, you already understand exactly what Sophia was carrying into the next 5 years. 5 years passed. Annie grew into a serious, watchful 5-year-old who noticed everything and said very little, the way children do when they grow up around adults who are always tired. Sophia worked nights as a home health aide and days cleaning offices, and still fell behind on Annie's treatments more months than she liked to admit. Then a listing came across a staffing agency's board. Domestic help needed, live-in position, the Whitfield estate. Sophia stared at that name on the screen for a long time before she applied under a different last name. Bennett, her grandmother's maiden name, the only piece of her old identity she let herself keep. She told herself it was only about the paycheck and the health coverage the position offered for live-in staff. Coverage that would cover more of Annie's treatment than anything Sophia could get on her own. She told herself Lucas would never even see her in a house that size. She told herself a lot of things that turned out not to be true. The woman who answered the door for her interview was not Lucas. It was Bianca Sinclair Whitfield, the second Mrs. Whitfield, a woman who had married into the family 2 years after Sophia disappeared, and had spent every year since acting like she had always belonged there. Bianca was cruel in the particular way people become cruel when they have never once had to answer for anything in their lives. She had taken credit publicly, at galas and family dinners and one particularly memorable magazine profile, for donating the organs that had saved Lucas and Liam 5 years earlier. She carried a forged hospital certificate in a frame in the study to prove it. Nobody in that family had ever thought to question it. Why would they? Sophia got the job. For the first few weeks, she kept her head down, learned the new layout of a house she used to own, and avoided every hallway where she might run into Lucas directly. It worked. For a while. It did not stay that way. Annie, forced to accompany her mother on evening shifts because there was no one else to watch her, wandered too close to Liam's shoes one evening while he was playing in the main hall. She bumped him. He scuffed a shoe. It was nothing. To Bianca, it was an opportunity. "Kneel down," Bianca said, standing over both of them in the hallway. "Please," Sophia answered. "We're servants. We are not animals." "You think I won't hit you too," Bianca said. "All you're good for is cleaning this family's toilets, and you're bad at even that. Liam, darling, has she learned her lesson, or do we throw her out like trash?" "Throw her out," Liam said, 7 years old and already learning exactly what his stepmother wanted him to learn. "Please," Sophia said. "Not my daughter. She's done nothing." "Nice try," Bianca said. "Get down. Lick his shoes. Now." Dylan Reyes, the family's longtime butler, watched from the end of the hallway. He had worked for the Whitfields for 11 years, long enough to recognize cruelty the moment he saw it, and long enough to know exactly who to call. This was not the first time he had seen Bianca cross a line with the staff. It was the first time a child was involved, and that was the line he was not willing to let pass quietly. He stepped into the next room and dialed Lucas directly. "Sir, it's Mrs. Whitfield," Dylan said. "She's hurting the new maid and her daughter. It's bad. You need to come home." "Dylan, I'm in the middle of the Argyle deal," Lucas said, distracted, phone pressed between his ear and shoulder as he signed papers on his desk. "Sir," Dylan said, his voice sharper than Lucas had ever heard from him, "I heard a child screaming." There was a long pause on the line. "Give me 20 minutes, Lucas said. By the time Lucas arrived, Bianca had already moved from threats to something worse, guiding Liam's small hand into a slap against Sophia's face, calling it discipline, calling it a lesson in how the family handled people who stepped out of line. Lucas walked in on his own son's hand raised against a woman on her knees, a 5-year-old girl crying against her side. "You are teaching our son to beat people," Lucas said. "What is wrong with you?" "She almost ruined Liam's shoes," Bianca said. "I was disciplining her." "This ends now," Lucas said. "Take them to the hospital. When I get back, they had both better be fine." It was in the car on the way to the hospital, Sophia and Annie in the back seat, Dylan driving, Lucas turned halfway around in the front passenger seat, checking on them, that something in his chest went cold. He had seen that face somewhere before he could name it, the particular way she held her jaw when she was trying not to cry. He had seen it across a breakfast table for 6 years. "Sophia," he said quietly, almost to himself. She did not answer. She looked out the window instead, and Lucas did not push it. Not yet, but he did not forget it either. If you have ever wondered whether the people who wronged you would ever recognize what they lost, keep listening, because this is only the beginning of what Bianca is about to lose, and comment below the moment you think she finally understands it. Once Lucas started asking quiet questions, pulling old employment records, staring a little too long at the new maid across the dinner table, Bianca understood that the real threat to her was never Sophia's poverty. It was Sophia's past. So Bianca changed tactics. She did not come at Sophia with her hands this time. She came with money, and with a threat far more dangerous than a slap. "I know who you are, Sophia," Bianca said, finding her alone in the laundry room a few days later. "And I know that little girl might be Lucas's daughter, given how she looks at him when she thinks nobody's watching. If that gets out, you lose everything. Your job, your daughter's medical coverage through this house, all of it. But I will give you $1 million to disappear tonight and never come back." Sophia stood there a long moment, one hand pressed against a folded towel, thinking about Annie's next round of treatment, thinking about the 6 months of back payments still owed to the clinic, thinking about how tired she was of being invisible in her own former home. "Wire it to this account," she finally said, "and I want it in writing that you will leave my daughter's name completely out of this." Bianca smiled, certain she had won. She had no idea that she had just put in writing, in her own handwriting, an admission that Annie existed, that Annie mattered enough to pay $1 million to erase, evidence that would come back to destroy her later. Every dollar of that money went straight into Annie's treatment fund within the week. Sophia did not spend 1 cent on herself, even as her own surgical scars quietly began aching again under the stress of hiding, working double shifts, and raising a sick child completely alone. "She took $1 million and vanished," Lucas told Dylan, once he realized Sophia tonight and never come back. Sophia stood there a long moment, one hand pressed against a folded towel, thinking about Annie's next round of treatment, thinking about the 6 months of back payments still owed to the clinic, thinking about how tired she was of being invisible in her own former home. "Wire it to this account," she finally said, "and I want it in writing that you will leave my daughter's name completely out of this." Bianca smiled, certain she had won. She had no idea that she had just put in writing, in her own handwriting, an admission that Annie existed, that Annie mattered enough to pay $1 million to erase, evidence that would come back to destroy her later. Every dollar of that money went straight into Annie's treatment fund within the week. Sophia did not spend 1 cent on herself, even as her own surgical scars quietly began aching again under the stress of hiding, working double shifts, and raising a sick child completely alone. "She took $1 million and vanished," Lucas told Dylan, once he realized Sophia had left the estate without notice. Again. "Sir?" Dylan said carefully, respectfully. "Are you certain that is the whole story?" Lucas did not answer him, but he did not stop asking questions either. With Sophia gone from the house, Bianca moved to erase the last piece of evidence standing between her and total control of the family, Annie herself. She staged a fight between the 2 children during a rare visit, coached Liam beforehand exactly what to say, and petitioned Lucas to have Annie sent away to a reform facility 2 states over, permanently removing her from the estate and from Lucas's growing suspicion for good. "Liam, tell your father what really happened," Bianca said, standing behind him with a hand on his shoulder. "Who hit who first?" "It was Annie," Liam said, coached and afraid to disappoint the only mother he currently knew. She hit me first. Then she is going to reform school until she learns some manners, Lucas said, exhausted, distracted, still not seeing the whole shape of what was happening around him. But before Annie could be sent anywhere, Lucas ordered one thing Bianca had not planned for: a paternity test, quietly, through his own personal physician rather than the family's usual doctor. Not out of kindness toward the maid's daughter, he told himself, but out of his own need to know the truth before he made a decision he could not undo. Bianca met privately with the lab technician the night before the test was scheduled to run. "Add this to the sample," she said, sliding a small vial across the counter. "Nobody needs to know." The vial contained sodium citrate, an anticoagulant, enough to corrupt any blood match run against it, including, if it came to that, a real one. It was a small thing, easy to slip past a technician being paid handsomely to look the other way, and it would have worked, if not for Dylan noticing the same technician meeting privately with Bianca in the West Wing 2 nights in a row, and mentioning it, almost as an afterthought, to Lucas over coffee the next morning. "Mrs. Whitfield handed me a vial and told me to add it before I ran the sample," the lab technician later admitted, once Lucas's own investigator sat him down. "I did not know exactly what it was until a second, unaltered sample came back completely different from the first." "Annie is my daughter," Lucas said quietly, reading the second, uncorrupted result alone in his study at nearly midnight. This is the part where the truth starts working against the person who tried to bury it. If you have ever watched someone build a lie so big they forgot they would eventually have to defend it in front of everyone, you already know where this is going. Part 7. What her body finally could not carry anymore. The same week the real test results came back, Sophia collapsed at the small apartment she and Annie had moved into after leaving the estate. 5 years of untreated surgical complications, worsened by the stress of the last several months, finally caught up to her all at once. A neighbor called an ambulance. She was rushed into intensive care under her real name for the first time in 5 years, because it was the only name on her old insurance records the hospital could find. Mr. Whitfield, the attending doctor said, once Lucas arrived, having been called by the same neighbor who found Sophia's emergency contact card still listing him from years earlier, her liver and kidney function are critically low. Whatever surgery she had years ago, her body never fully recovered from it, and the last several months appear to have accelerated the decline significantly. "What surgery?" Lucas asked, standing in a hallway that felt very much like the one he had stood in 5 years earlier, waiting for different news about a different kind of loss. It was Dr. Ethan Miller, Annie's father, and the same surgeon who had operated on both Lucas and Liam 5 years before, who happened to be on call that night and recognized Sophia's name on the chart immediately, who finally told Lucas the truth Sophia had spent 5 years hiding from him. "It was her, Lucas," Dr. Miller said, closing the door of the small consultation room behind them. "Not Bianca. Sophia gave you her kidney. She gave Liam part of her liver. She asked me to help her stage evidence of an affair so you would let her go without guilt, because she was terrified of becoming a permanent burden while the two of you were still recovering. Bianca's donor certificate on your study wall is forged. I have the original hospital record. I have had it this entire time, because Sophia asked me to keep it safe, and never asked me to use it." Lucas said nothing for a long moment, staring through the small window into the room where Sophia lay connected to more machines than he could count. "She gave up her own body to save us," he finally said, "and I let another woman take credit for it while Sophia scrubbed our floors under a different name. Lucas filed for divorce that same week, before Sophia had even regained full consciousness. He drove to the estate directly from the hospital, still in yesterday's clothes. 'Bianca, it is over,' he told her, standing in the doorway of the study, in front of the very frame holding her forged certificate. "I know everything now. You are going to throw away 5 years of marriage for a woman who lied to your face," Bianca said, her voice rising, the frame rattling slightly against the wall behind her. "She lied to protect us," Lucas answered. "You lied to take from us. Those are not the same thing, and I am done pretending they are." Bianca called her adoptive mother that same night, certain she could still salvage something out of the wreckage. "He's choosing her over everything I've given this family," Bianca said into the phone, pacing the length of the study. "What have you actually given this family?" her mother asked, her voice thin over the line. "That wasn't already someone else's first." Bianca did not have an answer for that. She hung up the phone and started planning instead, because if she could not keep the marriage, she decided she would at least make sure nobody walked away from this looking clean. If you have ever had to rebuild an entire life from nothing while the person who wronged you kept every advantage they started with, tell me in the comments, because Sophia is about to get the one thing money never gave Bianca: the truth, spoken out loud, in front of everyone who mattered. Sophia recovered slowly, over the following weeks, in the same hospital wing under a level of care Lucas insisted on personally overseeing. By the time she was strong enough to stand on her own for more than a few minutes at a time, the divorce was finalized, and Lucas asked her, in the same hospital room where she had nearly died, to marry him again. The wedding was small, held in the garden behind the estate, close enough to the house that Sophia could still see the hallway where she had once knelt on the floor. Liam stood beside his father, and for the first time in months, Annie stood beside her mother, without either of them needing to hide who they actually were to each other. Bianca was not invited. She came anyway. "Before any of you say I do," Bianca announced, walking straight down the aisle with her phone raised. "Everyone check your phones right now. This is the same woman abandoning her sick husband and son for another man 5 years ago. Some things never change, no matter how many organs she claims to have donated." An old video began circulating through the guests' phones, footage appearing to show Sophia with another man, footage Bianca had kept hidden for years, waiting for exactly this moment. She expected shock. What she got instead was Dr. Ethan Miller standing up from the third row with a hospital folder already in his hand because Lucas had asked him days earlier, quietly, to be ready. "I staged that footage," Dr. Miller said, his voice carrying easily across the garden, "at Sophia's request, 5 years ago, because she donated her own organs to save this family and was quietly dying from the recovery, and she would rather all of you hate her than pity her for a choice she never regretted making. Here is the original surgical record. Her name is on it, not Bianca's." The garden went completely silent. One more thing came to light that same afternoon, thanks to a private investigator Lucas had quietly hired after filing for divorce weeks earlier, results that had only come back that morning. The Sinclair family fortune Bianca had married into was never fully hers to claim either. Her adoption papers into the Sinclair estate, presented for years as proof of an old and respected bloodline, had been quietly forged more than a decade earlier, before Lucas had ever met her. She had built her entire identity on borrowed money and a stolen name, the exact same way she had spent 5 years trying to steal credit for a stranger's sacrifice. "Get her off this property," Lucas said, and this time, nobody moved to stop the 2 security guards standing at the edge of the garden from doing exactly that. Sophia and Lucas finished their vows that same afternoon, in front of guests who had just watched 5 years of lies collapse in under 10 minutes. Liam apologized to the mother he had spent years being taught to resent, and to the sister he had been taught to see as a threat to everything he was supposed to inherit. Annie, still small enough to be lifted onto her father's shoulders for the first time in her life, laughed for what her mother later said was the first time in longer than she could remember. For the first time in 5 years, nobody in that house had to hide who they really were from anyone else in it. The truth cost Sophia 5 years, 2 organs, and very nearly her own life. But it turns out the same thing that almost destroyed her was the only thing that could ever set her free. If this story reached you, tell me in the comments which moment hit you the hardest: the floor, the vial, or the garden. And subscribe to Odyssey Stories for the next one. These stories only get harder to walk away from.